So in one of my last videos, I broke down a Fox News segment and talked about how Fox News is the propaganda arm of the Republican Party. And today we're going to break down a CNN video because CNN is the propaganda arm of the Democratic Party. And this is a really revealing segment here by Chris Cuomo as the Democrats are trying to prove that Trump was directly responsible for the Capitol riots. We're going to see how CNN works essentially as just blatant propaganda for whatever the agenda of the Democratic Party is. While horrible things are going on, they're not going down to the border and seeing if Joe Biden's doing anything about the kids in cages. They're not talking about the war machine, obviously. They keep us distracted with nonsense like this. So let's watch and then we'll discuss.
13 minutes. That's all that really should have resonated with senators today. 13 minutes was the duration of the video compilation of the events of January 6th, one of the worst days in American history. And Trump was all over it. And what was wrong about all of it was obvious. The hats, the faux flags being used as battering rams, and most of all, the anger. Anger and animus against our country's laws that led to an insurrection attacking our democracy. That is the story of January 6, and it is one that may not be given an ending in the trial that we're watching. Other than the presentation of the horrifying reality that brought these senators together today, today was a farce. After all, there's only one reason this trial is being held after Trump's defeat, and that reason is Senator Mitch McConnell. McConnell asked to kick the trial until after Trump was out of office. This is a fact. He never said he was doing that because they had to consider whether or not it is proper to try a president so late in the game. That is a fact. He said he wanted to give the trial the time it deserved. He lied. He voted to say it wasn't constitutional. He didn't know that then? It was another bait and switch. Democrats, how many times will you pet the snake?
So even though Trump is officially out of office now, CNN still can't help but milk every last dollar they can out of the media spectacle that is Trump. They can't stop focusing on his personality, his Twitter, his legal battles. Not what he's been doing in terms of governance, right? Not his increasing of drone strikes, not his sanctioning of Iran and Venezuela in the midst of a pandemic. They have covered the COVID-19 crisis a little bit only because it's been very convenient for them to attack Trump's comically poor response to the COVID crisis and pandemic. Not that now that Joe Biden's in office, nothing has changed, of course, because these liberal Democrats of ours don't actually care about the working class. But when Trump was botching the COVID-19 crisis, they were able to offer vague platitudes and strange attacks against Trump and play Trump's ridiculous statements about COVID on repeat and bolster CNN's ratings. And that's exactly what they're trying to do here, trying to the hyperbole they are using about the Capitol riots are incredible. One of the worst days in American history. An attempted coup. America knows nothing about coups. Ignore in 1953 when we overthrew Mohammad Mossadegh in Iran. Ignore when we removed the democratically elected Salvador Allende and put Augusto Pinochet in power, who promptly rounded up 20,000 leftists and murdered them in a soccer stadium. These were not these acts that America did were not horrible because they took place elsewhere, right? They didn't take place here. This was so bad because it was Americans attacking other Americans and trying to steal AOC's shoes or whatever. This is just America getting like a fraction of what we've imposed on the rest of the world, especially the global south. It just shows how pompous and elitist these people are, like Chris Cuomo. You can hear how dramatic he's making it in his voice. This was a coup. And you know what? It's all the Republicans' fault. It is Trump's fault. It is Mitch McConnell's fault that this happened. But let me show you something. Let me show you a report from a real journalist, Ali Vargas, who was at the Capitol riots, or who got this from the Capitol riots, which shows you the kind of elements who were actually there. At the Capitol riots, we had the Falun Gong, Iranian monarchists, as well as Cuban gusanos. Now, what are these groups? These are CIA-backed and funded groups who the CIA backed and funded in order to destabilize countries that were taking a left-wing economic path. Iran towards nationalizing most of their industries and centrally planning things, and then China and Cuba obviously had communist revolutions. And the U.S. tells you that the groups they're backing overseas are these humanitarian groups who are standing up for democracy and human rights. But it's a lie. These are far right-wing extremist groups. So then when some of these far right-wing extremist groups settle in America, they're participating in things like the Capitol riots. So you see how this was not Trump or McConnell's fault, these Capitol riots. I mean, partially. Of course, part of it lays on Trump, and his cultish followers, but a lot of the elements here were right-wing groups who have been propped up by the CIA, and of course we know there's only so many disaffected Trump voters who are susceptible to his brand of fake right-wing racist populism, because we don't have socialism, right? Because 78% of workers live paycheck to paycheck, so they're willing to follow anyone like Trump who says, I'm going to end the wars and bring your jobs back, even if it's a lie, and he's able to trick them, into being violent and angry. But it's not all Trump and McConnell's fault, right? As is proved by the fact that CIA-backed groups showed up here and were rioting right alongside the Trump supporters. And you even had people trying to blame, Chris Cuomo doesn't do it here, but I believe Rachel Maddow was doing this, and maybe Jake Tapper. They were trying to blame the Capitol riots on Russia. This same story with Russia aid. As Biden's announcing that the U.S. is going to crack down on Russia, we're going to be harsh on them. Ignore the fact that Trump increased troop presence around Russia, and increased our troop presence and our destabilization efforts against Syria, who's an ally of Russia. Forget all the things he did that were hostile towards Russia. Biden wants to be more hostile, and actually it was Russia's fault for the Capitol riots. Not the CIA's fault for backing right-wing extremist groups. And one last thing, just to show you how much hyperbole liberals are using about this coup, this attempted coup of disaffected Trump voters breaking things at the Capitol. Look what Brooklyn Dad Defiant, who gained a following by tweeting mean, sassy things towards Trump, said. He compares the Capitol riots to 9/11 and says the Capitol riots were in fact worse because it was Americans attacking Americans and not a foreign country attacking us, right? Because we in America would expect those darn dirty Muslims in the Middle East to attack us, but not us good God-fearing Americans. We would never riot and kill people. Like, how do these people think the world works? It is insane to me, one, but two, the main point I want to make is you wonder why Trump got so popular, right? People wonder, how could conservatives fall for this cult of personality, right? This guy who offers blind patriotism. Yeah, America, we're America, make America great. Well, you have the other side, and Trump, of course, ran against Hillary Clinton, who is kind of the epitome of liberalism. But the other side is comparing when Trump supporters break some stuff at the Capitol to 9/11, when 3,000 plus people died, and when, firefighters were showing an act of real patriotism and real heroism, running into that building, risking their lives, and many of them did die to save, their fellow Americans. And it shows that collective spirit that humans have, that capitalism hasn't quite eroded yet. Right? We're still willing to run into a building, and die for our fellow Americans, or some of us are. And then you have the liberals downplaying this event and saying it doesn't matter at all. And of course, I disagree with how the neoconservatives in this country use 9/11 to lie us into all these wars. But I'm still not going to come out here and say that this fake coup attempt where Trump supporters broke some things and yelled racist stuff at the Capitol was equally as bad as the 9/11 terrorist attacks, because I understand Fox News is going to take that and say, look how unhinged and crazy and disrespectful these liberals are. Don't you want to be a patriotic American and be a conservative? No, you need to be a patriotic American and be a socialist. Both these ruling class parties are full of nonsense. Only the proletariat, the working class, knows what's best for America, because we're the only people who live like real Americans. We don't live, in this elite class, living a life of luxury without actually doing real work every day. Those people don't know what's best for America. They're doing political theater to lie to you and gaslight you away from moving America towards what can actually save it: socialism, communism. Peace.